We're here to talk about active energy management. As I said, I lead the Energy and Sustainability Services Group for Schneider. We are about 2,000 employees spread out around the globe, okay? And so what I'm going to talk about first is the disruption that's going on in the space, leading up to why we do what we do, all right? So as you can see up on the screen, we are on the brink of destruction. We are on the brink of disruption, according to Navigant. The electricity system that has served us well for more than 100 years is facing a fundamental threat to its existence. I wouldn't necessarily agree that we're on the brink. Okay, I think we are in the middle of a massive disruption, and I'll kind of paint the picture as to why. But this industry, many of us grew up in it. I've been in it since I got out of undergraduate school, and it's been nothing but exciting, all right? So I'm going to take you through a little bit, as to why as we talk through this. You've probably heard this before from us, that disruption is driven by the new world of energy in 3Ds plus E. 3Ds being, we're becoming dramatically more digitized than we ever have been before. Second, decentralized. We'll talk about each of these. And third, decarbonized, all in a much more electric world, okay? And all of this is providing the catalyst for this disruption. And the key is, what are each of us here in this room as leaders going to do about it? And I'll get to that as well, okay? First, on the digitization front, you've probably heard us talk about this a lot within the context of EcoStruxure and all of our connected products. But if you look back in 2014, in buildings alone, there were estimated to be about 1.7 billion number of connected devices. Okay, so a lot of connected devices. And the forecasts are that by 2025, there'd be about 75 billion connected devices out there, a massive increase. Now, I'm going to be the first to tell you that number is probably way off, all right? And I'm going to use a quick analogy. If you look at the telecommunications business, in 1985, a large US-based telecommunications provider contracted with McKinsey to do a study with them on what the size of the mobile cellular market would be in the year 2000. Okay, so picture yourself in 1985, McKinsey, one of the premier management consulting groups, comes in and is going to tell you how big that cellular market's going to be and help you determine whether or not you should get into that business. So they hired McKinsey. McKinsey did the study, and they actually came back and told them that the number of mobile users or cellular users in the year 2000, cellular users, would be about 1 million. Okay? In the year 2000, what do you think the actual number was? Anyone want to venture a guess? Shout it out if you do. It was actually 110 million. So McKinsey was only off by 109 million. Okay? They were only off by 109 million. Their estimate was 1 million, and it was 110 million. So that telecommunications company chose not to get into the cellular market because it was too small. It was a big mistake. And they spent decades getting out of that mistake and having to rework themselves in a number of different ways to a highly successful company today, but they completely missed different aspects of that market. Why? They underestimated the impact of digitization and what would happen. Now, they had the experts telling them, so I'm just here to tell you that number's off. It might be 10 times that number by the time we get to 2025, because every one of us is more connected today. We have more devices under our control than what we were yesterday, and it's going to be even more exponential as we go on. The second category, decentralization. More than half of companies around the world now are putting in on-site generation of some sort. Now, this in and of itself is not new. This has been happening for a long time. Combined heat and power. Big companies with large steam loads would put in cogeneration facilities to produce electricity in addition to the steam. What's happened is it's become much smaller and smaller, more cost-effective to put it on site. Different types, whether it's combined heat and power, biomass, PV, wind, you name it. There's been an explosion in this, and companies are jumping on board. More than half. Okay, think disruption now. The decarbonization side, when you look at the amount of capital being invested into old fossil fuels relative to the global investment in renewables, it's dramatically changed. I can think back just a few years ago, 5, 10 years ago, this was completely reversed and then some. The blue bubble would have been really, really small. The green bubble would have been really, really small relative to the blue bubble in terms of overall investment. So across each of these, digitization, decentralization, and decarbonization, it is happening, okay? It's not something that's going slow anymore. It's going very fast. So the disruption is upon us. It's happening. It started. So if we think we're on the brink, we are too late. It needs to change, and our actions need to change as leaders, and we need to do something different, all right? So when I think about disruption, and I think about this industry, I want to take us back just for a second to what it's been for the last 100 years, because it's largely been the same. Okay, there's been technology improvements in generation, there's been technology improvements at the transmission and distribution level, and even technologies at the end-use consumption level, advancements, okay? But largely, this industry is the same. You have centralized generation, you transmit it and distribute it to the end users, and you have end-use consumption. That's largely been steady. The main thing that's changed in the business model has been the influx of deregulation or liberalized markets, and that's had a change, okay? That's had an impact for sure. But it's functioning largely the same way. And then in the more recent history, you've seen this expansion of distributed energy resources behind the meter. That too isn't necessarily brand new, but what's really new is the explosion of it and the size of it. So it's gone from large scale to very small scale, where it's become much more cost effective to do this. And now what you see happening on the end user side is a meshing of both assets and energy, to the point where at times it becomes very blurry as to when an end user is a consumer versus a producer. And so you've heard the rise of this term prosumer. So it's no longer that distinguishable between just the producer end of it, which you see on the left-hand side of this chart, to the consuming end at the other end. It is meshing. And that's why we refer to this as the mesh grid, where assets and energy are more commingling. Things are moving faster. I can make a decision right now about whether my phone is consuming or producing. Right now I'm producing, it's on battery, but I could plug it in and start charging that thing up, and immediately I can be flip-flopping. So that's happening in each one of our own personal lives, but it's happening in our facilities as well. Now you layer in things like blockchain, peer-to-peer transactions, and all these devices are more grid-enabled, communicable, so they can interact in a different way with the grid. And so what this is doing is this is putting pressure on the business model of old, okay? So the power and strength has been in the centralized grid operator, the runner of the centralized dispatch system, and that is shifting to the consumer, and we can't stop it, okay? It is changing so fast. So the question for all of us is, what do we do about it? Where do we go with this? And I would say, just to start, what can we do to prepare? And you see this statement up here that as leaders, we need to be ready to respond to change. So let me give you a quick example. Many years ago, I was an energy manager for a large forest products company. They were global, but I managed all the facilities from an energy perspective. One year, we had a freeze come across the southern half of the U.S., and it shut in a lot of natural gas, and many weren't able to run their facilities or even heat their homes. The company I worked for had firm capacity on the pipelines, so we continued our flow of gas to our paper mills. So we took the gas, we produced steam, and we created electricity for our facilities and continued to run. A few days after the event, so it lasted 3 days, prices spiked dramatically. I did some analysis and found that we would have made a ton of money shutting down the paper mill and just returning and selling our gas back onto the grid. We'd have made more money in 3 days of turning that gas back onto the grid and reselling it, because we had the firm capacity and we had firm deliveries, than we would have made in 6 months of operating at that mill. So I thought it'd be a good idea to go tell the mill manager about this, that they had this great idea. And I thought I'd be walking into a very receptive audience, and what I walked into was a buzzsaw. He was so mad. And the reason he was mad is because I failed to prepare him for that event, because he would have gladly shut the mill down, given all the employees 3 days off where they wouldn't have had to work, and he'd have made more money in the 3 days selling his gas back onto the grid than he would have selling the paper, and he could have still serviced the customers through the inventory we had in place to make those deliveries. So I made a big mistake. I did not prepare those whom I was responsible for a disruption in the marketplace in the way that they could really take advantage of it and not only profit from it, but turn around and serve the community by turning that gas back. So one thing that our companies need to do, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a few moments, is prepare ourselves for this disruption, because leaders must have the ability to see around the corner and develop a sixth sense to know what is it that we need to do to get ready. And sometimes I think we've gotten so comfortable in the environment that we're in that we miss the change that's necessary. One other quick example, I'm sure you're all familiar with the boiled frog example. If I take a pot of water and I put a frog in it, it's room temperature, and I heat it up to boiling, the frog will boil to death. It won't jump. If I take that same frog before it dies and have a boiling pot of water and throw the frog on the water, what does it do? It hits the water and immediately takes off. Why? It feels it. As soon as it hits it, it knows this is boiling water. In the other event, the frog boils to death. That's what's happening to all of us. We are boiling because this system's been the same for 100 years, and all of a sudden we have massive disruption and we're not doing what we need to be doing about it. The door is open, the horses have run out, and this market's moving. And as leaders, we all need to prepare our companies, our homes, our families for this disruption that's happening in the marketplace. We as leaders need to develop this sixth sense and an ability to see around this corner and prepare our companies much more adequately than we have. So how do we do that? So the way we approach this is there are three primary bubbles in this equation of active energy management. There's what we call the procurement bubble, or the gray bubble, where we help companies buy better. So today, we are arguably the largest third-party buyer on behalf of our clients of energy in the world, roughly 30 billion-ish. Now, don't get me wrong, we don't buy that energy and resell it to our customers. We provide a service to our clients to help them buy more effectively and more efficiently, and because of our size, scale, and understanding of the markets, we're able to do that in virtually any open market, competitive market around the world. The second bubble, the efficiency bubble, is we provide services to help companies. We go into their facilities, help companies become more efficient in how they run their operations. So it's not all a CapEx play. It's how you operate. It's how you manage your loads relative to the overall market. And then the third bubble is the sustainability bubble. How green should you be? How do you manage your carbon footprint? What's your environmental map? What's your impact? So historically, you would go to three different groups in most companies to provide this type of service. You would go to the procurement group for the gray bubble. You might go to the engineering or manufacturing group or the facility manager for the blue bubble. And you go to the chief sustainability officer in the last 5 or 10 years for the green bubble. And they acted very independently. That is all changing. And that's what we mean by active energy management. These three bubbles, if I could put this in motion, are converging and they're overlapping. So what's happening is, think about that mill in Arkansas from many years ago. It's becoming much more active, where you need to be more responsive and ready to make change and take action at a moment's notice when you have disruption taking place. It could be weather or climate-related disruption. We've seen some of that in the U.S. and other parts of the world with hurricanes and typhoons or earthquakes or things like that. So we need to be ready to take action from exogenous or climate-type oriented disruptions. But we also need to be ready to take action to market disruptions. There are things that happen market-wise or political or climate, and all of these things, if we're not prepared to take into account all three of these pieces as the market converges, we are going to totally miss the boat here, and we're not going to get it right. And so what we've seen is more communication and collaboration taking place within clients, even within our own company, across these historic silos of supply, demand, and sustainability, and they've been converging in what we refer to as active energy management. And let me tell you, it's a journey, and all of us are on it, whether we know it and acknowledge it or not. We may be blindly on the journey and not intentionally following a certain plan and action as to how we take advantage of it, or we may be intentional about it. I much prefer the intentional approach in plotting out how do we deal with this, how do we get a plan in place so that we can really aggressively optimize this on our own behalf. Because if you're not, somebody else is going to optimize you for their behalf. And it may be a grid, somebody that runs the central grid that's optimizing it for the benefit of the grid. It may be optimizing it for the benefit of somebody else, but you're getting optimized. And the question is, are you in control of that, or is somebody in control of you? So that's what we mean when we talk about active energy management. Here's a couple examples I'll share with you, and then I'll let you hear it from their voices. But this is Scott Bosarge. Scott is the Senior Vice President of Business Services for AEG, Anschutz Entertainment Group. There's about 60-some facilities around the world that are entertainment venues. So they want their customers to walk through that door, whether it's the Staples Center in Los Angeles, the O2, the Mercedes-Benz Center, I think in Shanghai. I mean, wherever their facility is, they're about entertainment. But they are also about the environment. So they want to have low energy consumption. They want to have water conservation as part of their overall picture. But they want their venues to be comfortable for their guests, but yet sustainable. And so Scott looked at it and said, I don't have all this data and information. So he started with, what's my strategy? How do I get all this data and information in one place? And so EcoStruxure Resource Advisor is the platform that he uses to track about 60 different streams of data. Not just energy, but water, waste, hazardous waste, all kinds of things that go into his overall environmental map that he uses and actually uses for outside reporting, as well as to monitor the effectiveness of his strategies and tactics that he has in place. So they collect that data on energy and water and other things in one secure platform, and he's actually making money off it. So we're finding cost savings on his behalf and implementing energy efficiency measures, and other things. The guy you see here on the left of this picture is a guy named Don Anderson. And Don is the Executive Director and Chief Sustainability Officer for the Blackstone Private Equity Group. Now, if you're familiar with Blackstone, they are one of the largest private equity holders in the world, all right? We work for about 22 or 23 of their portfolio companies. Some of the portfolio companies include like Hilton Hotels. They're a very large property REIT with office buildings in different parts of the world. They are performance food groups. So they have a variety and a mix of holdings, some in the retail, the big box retail space as well. And if you think about the mindset of a private equity, what do? They buy a portfolio company and they want to sell it at some point and have a monetization event in the future. What Don says is Don looks at it and says, I need to have all this data and information about all my portfolio companies to be assured that they are implementing environmentally friendly policies, that they're minimizing our carbon footprint, that we're performing to goals, and we're making money. And so he uses that data, and what he would say is it's not enough just to collect all this data. You've got to find the signal in the noise of information, because data just for the sake of data isn't going to be useful. So what he does is he says, I need to find where to go with this data and what to do. And so what he does is he creates scorecards across all his portfolio companies, and he tracks leaders and laggards. The leaders he attempts to replicate, the laggards he does something else with. He targets them for improvements, he puts targets on their back, but he goes at it very aggressively because they want a return on their investment. And so he uses everything from utility bill analysis, data collection of interval data analysis, down to very low-level, sub-meter level data to help drive those actions within his facilities. But he covers it for the entire portfolio. So he's in it for the money, yes, but he's in it for the climate and the environment as well, to see that they're implementing sustainable business practices. So this is also Albea, another client that came in with no strategy, and we work with Lori and other members of the team there, the executive team there at Albea, to put together a very integrated strategy across all three of those bubbles, the supply bubble, demand bubble, on the energy efficiency side, and sustainability, to balance those three things to come up with the optimal situation for them as a company and have a good return on the investment along the way. So that's what we talk about active energy management. I want you to listen to this and watch this video in the words of our clients.
For the ASICS Group, active energy management means insight in energy use in the different locations that we have around the world, which is offices, distribution centers, retail locations, and be able to see trends, peaks, lows, and identify opportunities for improvement.
So our active energy management actually is pretty new. Today we are still, I think, on an incremental change. We are waiting for disruption. We are working hard on it actually to innovate. And we believe that in the future, and in the very near future, we are going to be more and more disruptive actually to reach our goal. So we benefit every day. It's a long journey and it's a way to go, definitely.
I think today's environment with energy is a different place than it was maybe 20 years ago. I think it's discussed at board level far more frequently. People take it a bit more seriously. I think the whole carbon reduction thing has kind of brought the attention of senior managers to this agenda. It's looking at new technology, it's trying to understand new technology and the impact that it's going to be in 10, 15, 20 years' time.
Active energy management for our company means that it's a contribution to protect our margins. And the margins is what we are living for.
We did 7 workshops in 7 very different plants, and so we managed to find between 7% and 20% of potential saving, considering the global energy bill of the site. So that's huge and that's very encouraging.
So those are just a few examples of clients that have benefited from the services that we provide around this. And so I want to remind you, when you think about this equation, this is a massive disruption that's happening right in front of us. And that's what makes it fun. Or you can feel threatened by it. It makes it fun if we put together and work to put together a strategy and tactics as to how you're going to attack it and how you're going to deal with it and how you can actually profit from it and make the lives of your employees and the companies around you, much, much better. But this is the way we think about it in terms of the mesh grid. Assets and energy are mixing. The lines are blurring. Things are happening in a much different way than what it has in the past. And then you layer in things like digitization or peer-to-peer transactions. There is coming a day where I'll be on holiday and my rooftop solar unit, I'll be able to go to my phone and say, I'm out, but my rooftop solar is still functioning, the sun's still out, and I'm going to sell it to my neighbor down the street if the price is right. And I'll be able to transact right from here in a peer-to-peer fashion without having to go through a central grid operator to execute on that transaction. The day is coming when you'll have an algorithm built in or into your application, your app, or your phone or your iPad where you plug it in and it will determine whether or not you're a producer or a consumer. So it's coming down at a very micro level. And now if you magnify that up to the 75 billion, remember that's a low estimate, of devices that are connected in your buildings or in your plants or in your facilities, now is the time to take action and figure out what are you going to do to optimize your own equation. And that's what we mean by leaders need to have that sixth sense. There's also a humility that goes with it. And what I mean by that is leaders are learners. And so we have to constantly be learning. If we stop learning in this environment, we're dead. And so I would encourage you as leaders, look around the corner, figure out what data and information you need to have in your organization to best serve your company. And then find the signal in the noise. Put the strategies in place to take advantage of it. And then go make some money, go have some fun, go clean up the environment and create better, more sustainable operations for your organizations. I hope you enjoyed the session, and I hope maybe we learned a little something, and maybe you'll take something back and do something a little bit different in your organizations as you work to become more active in how you manage your energy and sustainability environment. So thank you all.